Brian, you may begin.
Thank you, Tony. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. On behalf of the U.S. Commercial Service, we welcome all of you to the fourth part of a five-part trade finance series during Export Week 2023. My name is Brian Beams. I am the Deputy Team Leader for ITA's Financial Services team and your host of today's webinar. The producer of this series is Anthony Sargis. Today, our federal partners and other subject matter experts will educate you, the U.S. exporter, on growing your export sales using grant funding. Just real quick on a recap of what we've done throughout this week and what's coming up. This is Thursday. We're getting through it all. Friday is a very good webinar on understanding from your federal partners what products and services and programs they have. So make sure you do finish strongly in your viewing of this five-part series. Housekeeping items. Everyone is currently on listen-only mode. This session is being recorded. If you object, please disconnect at this time. Participants can write in a question at any time in the Q&A feature, anytime throughout the presentation, I should say. Next week, we will be sending out the recordings and resource materials for all 5 sessions to all the registrants. Lastly, the views and opinions expressed in this presentation may not reflect the official policy or position of the U.S. government. I would now like to turn it over to Joe Raycraft, Export Finance Manager with the Small Business Administration's Office of International Trade. Joe?
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Appreciate it. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's Export Week presentation, Using Grant Funding to Grow Your Export Sales. My name is Joe Raycraft, and as Brian said, I'm SBA's Export Finance Manager for the New England region, and I'm one of about 20 other export finance managers that the SBA has across the country. We have covered a lot of ground this week with our 5-part series, and we did in our first part talk about our Export Finance Manager Network. So you'll be getting those slides. I encourage you to reach out to your local export finance manager in your region to introduce yourself, learn more about some of the resources that are available, and hopefully your export finance manager can make some good introductions for you. So just to recap, on Monday, we covered all the government resources that are available to small business exporters. And these are things like, the U.S. Commercial Service, the Export-Import Bank of the U.S., some of the programs of the SBA, the Small Business Development Centers and their services, SCORE and the benefits of working with their advisors, the Women's Business Centers, and even the Veterans Business Outreach Centers. So lots of resources out there for exporters. Tuesday, we took a little bit of a deeper dive into export credit insurance and some of the other international services that are offered with commercial banks. And those are things like letters of credit and foreign exchange, standby letters of credit. Yesterday, we covered export business planning and export readiness. And that was a great presentation by Denise Whitford from the Small Business Development Centers here in Connecticut. And really was a pretty in-depth webinar on business planning. And today and tomorrow, we're kind of changing the focus a little bit. Now we're really looking at the funding sources that are available for small business exporters. Today, again, the emphasis is going to be on growing your exports through working with some of the reimbursable grant funding that it's out there. And then tomorrow, myself and Richard Foy from the U.S. Export-Import Bank, we're going to have a webinar that's going to focus on the specific types of financing that are available through both the SBA and the Export-Import Bank. So as I mentioned, we're going to learn about some grant funding opportunities today. And we've got 2 great programs. One of them is Food Export, and the other one is SBA's funded state trade expansion programs. On Food Export's program, they've got a branded program, and that provides 50% cost reimbursement for a wide variety of international marketing activities for small business exporters of food and other agricultural products. April King is with us today. She's Food Export's liaison, and she's going to talk more about Food Export's programs and services. And we're also joined by a user of Food Export, Virginie Saulnier. She's Vice President Global Dairy Sales for Agrimark, which is a dairy farmer cooperative. And she'll talk about her exporting experience and also the experience working with Food Export. That'll be followed by our STEP grant funding program, which is, again, a reimbursable grant to small businesses that helps to offset export-related costs, such as international trade show participation, translations, website development and optimization, and more. Alan Dillingham from the state of New Hampshire, he runs the New Hampshire STEP program. He's the project director. He's with us today to share more information about the STEP program. And with Alan is a user of the STEP program, Kevin McCarthy, who is Global Sales Officer for SleepNet, a manufacturer of non-invasive respirators. And Kevin will also talk about his exporting experience and the benefits of that his company has obtained working with STEP. I have to say, SleepNet is also, I want to congratulate them. They were named last night as SBA's New Hampshire 2023 Exporter of the Year. So congratulations to Kevin and his team. So let's start, with the food export presentation. I want to introduce April. So April's been working with companies in New England since 2016 to help them achieve their mission of exporting food, beverage, and seafood products. While now living in Philadelphia, she was previously a Mainer and worked for the Maine International Trade Center in providing trade research for companies on top markets, foreign regulations, and various other international trade topics. For the last 5 years, April has been with Food Export Northeast and continued to work with food, beverage, and seafood companies in guiding them through the resources available from Food Export. As of 2020, she also became a certified global business professional from the National Association of Small Business International Trade Educators. April, we're really happy you're here, and please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Joe, and thank you for having me here today. As Joe mentioned, my name is April King, and I'm a liaison with Food Export Northeast, and our focus is on assisting food and beverage exporters. I want to thank in advance Virginie, the head of global sales at Agrimark, for sharing her story today about exporting and utilizing Food Export's programs and services. Hearing companies speak about their utilization is often more impactful than just hearing me talk about it, which is what I'm going to do now. As I mentioned today, we are going to cover the 50% reimbursement program on international marketing that covers food, beverage, and other agricultural products. But before I dive into the details of the program, let me explain a little bit more about Food Export. Food Export Northeast and Midwest are nonprofit trade organizations who work with small and medium-sized producers in the Northeast and Midwest, and our focus is on value-added agricultural products. Food Export is funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and our member states. Our member states are the State Department of Agricultures within each state in the Northeast and Midwest, and we are governed by a board of directors, which consists of the secretaries, directors, or commissioners of agriculture in our member states. Besides the program I'm going to discuss in detail today, we also have a range of other programs and services. We focus on helping companies figure out how to export through our webinars, our Export Essentials modules, and our Export Advisor program. We also have about 50 events a year that get companies in touch with international buyers. These range from buyers missions, where we bring international buyers over to the United States. Usually it's in conjunction with a food show. And we set up meetings between those US companies and the international buyers in a speed dating-like format. We also have trade missions in various countries that bring US food companies over to that country to learn more about the market and meet with the buyers from those countries. And the last thing I'll say about some of our other services is that we have a network of in-market representatives all around the world who are in touch with the international buyers in their markets and also the market trends, and you can access their knowledge through some of our services. All right, so no matter where you're joining us in the United States from today, there is a trade organization that covers your state. The company must be headquartered in the United States, and we in these different organizations work with companies based on where the sales headquarters is and not necessarily where the manufacturing headquarters is. I work for Food Export Northeast, but Food Export Northeast and Midwest have an alliance, so we actually have the same programs and services. If you were in any of the yellow states here, you would work with the Southern United States Trade Association. Their reimbursement program is called the Cost Share Program. They have the same funding regulations, the same eligibility requirement the Food Export does. And if you were in the green states, you would work with the Western United States Agricultural Trade Association. Their program is called the Fund Match Program. Again, we get the funding from the same place. We have the same regulations and eligibility requirements. You're welcome to contact me and I can refer you over to them, or you can look them up via their website. To be eligible, you must have value-added agricultural products such as food, beverage, or wood products, which is at least 50% U.S. agricultural content by weight, which excludes packaging, water, and salt. Essentially, that means that most of the ingredients need to be grown or harvested within the United States. And we also do cover a commodity, and the only commodity we cover, is seafood. And you can see here some of the product categories that we cover: snack foods, convenience, natural products, specialty, private label, food ingredients, food service, feed ingredients, and pet food. As an example of how the product eligibility works, if a company has a chocolate chip cookie and most of the product is flour, sugar, and butter, it might have some chocolate chips, but if the flour, sugar, and butter were all grown and harvested within the United States and the chocolate chips aren't, that is perfectly fine because the chocolate chips only make up a small portion of the product. All right, now on to our main topic. Our branded program is 50% reimbursement on international marketing. I'll go over what is eligible in just a minute, but to give you an overview of how the application works, it is a yearly program and you must submit while we have funding and before the activity happens. We recommend submitting before October 31st for the following year, but we do take applications on a rolling basis. We are still currently taking applications for 2023, but there has been a very high demand. It is a reimbursement program, so you must incur the cost up front, and then after you will submit your claims with which documentation that includes invoices, proof of payment, and the photos of the activity that you were submitting for. Any international claim requires the U.S. origin statement, which is a statement such as Made in America or Product of the USA. The minimum reimbursement is $2,500, and the maximum reimbursement is $300,000 per year. For first-time users, they can request up to $25,000 if they haven't exported before, and $50,000 if they have exported before. And that maximum is for all the activities combined. Companies must be a small business as defined by the Small Business Administration. That goes off of the employee count and the type of organization. Usually the cutoff is roughly around 500 full-time employees. It's not related to sales numbers. As far as what is eligible, there's a long list of activities, and this isn't an exclusive list either. In the United States, the only thing that is eligible is larger U.S. trade shows that have an international presence, such as the Winter and Summer Fancy Food Shows or the Natural Product Expo East and West shows. There's a set list, usually I think about 25 U.S. trade shows that are eligible, and there's a lot of foreign trade shows that are eligible. And that's if you do the foreign trade show yourself or if your importer does it on your behalf and bills it back to you. If there is a U.S. pavilion, you must exhibit in the pavilion. That's usually more the case for international shows. There's only a handful of U.S. trade shows that have a U.S. pavilion. Besides the booth fee, eligible expenses including getting a booth built, contractor fees for setting up or taking down the booth, marketing materials, shipping, and advertising in relation to the show are all eligible. There is a longer list of eligible expenses for foreign markets only, and I'm going to run through those now. Packaging and labeling is our largest expense category right now. Packaging for foreign markets that have certain requirements is eligible for 50% reimbursement. That includes the design, the translation, and the label itself, even the labor to put on the sticker, if it's a sticker that needs to be attached to the package. And often the cost for new packaging can be prohibitive when trying to enter market. So this is a great way to maximize your marketing budget and make it more accessible. Website development for foreign markets is also eligible. This includes the design of the website and translation. We've seen different examples of these. Some companies create a new page in the local domain. So instead of foodexport.org, they'll do foodexport.ca for Canada and localize it to that market. And then some companies use their existing website and have flags at the top right to target those specific markets via the language on them. And the design of that, the new page, any photos that go into that is all eligible for reimbursement. Social media is also a big increasing expense. Advertising on social media or even using an influencer is eligible. We would need to see this target an international audience. And often the importer will do this for you, or you will work with another firm that does this for you. Again, we will need to see the US origin statement, how it can be incorporated, or it can be incorporated as something as simple as a made in the USA hashtag. You probably can't see it here, but in the top right corner, somewhere in those hashtags is made in the USA or product of the USA. Videos that the companies do about the company or their product are also eligible. Advertising in foreign magazines or email campaigns are eligible. Giveaways, for example, pens, stress balls, keychains are eligible up to $4 per item. And these are also eligible for US trade shows or foreign markets in general. Point of sale materials are popular as trade shows, but they're also popular on their own. And that can be anything from a sell sheet to a catalog, anything that you might attract to get attention. We've also recently seen some of like the sell sheets turned into QR codes as well. While we cannot reimburse for slotting fees, we can reimburse for temporary shelf displays, which is something like you would see at the end of an aisle or at checkout. Posters and banners are eligible if they are used, again, at a trade show in the US that's eligible or internationally. Again, we need to see the US origin statement, such as made in the United States. In-store demonstrations, like you see here in the bottom right, are eligible. We can never reimburse for the cost of your own product, but the supplies like the sampling cups, the spoons, the display, the fees for the contractor to hand out the product is eligible, along with what the store charges to put on the demo. This is not an exclusive list of what is eligible, and often new forms of advertising are being created, but it gives you an idea of what the program can be used for. That's it for me. Please feel free to reach out with me to questions. My email is aking@foodexport.org, and you can also find my contact information on foodexport.org. And now I'll turn it back to Joe.
Thanks, April. That was great. Couple things that I just wrote down here as you were speaking, and one thing you noted was you're in-market experts. And I think, I always think when you're exporting, if you have friends overseas, right, that are in the industry, how important that is. And can you kind of talk a little bit more about those insiders, those experts you have in market, and some of the things that they can do to help a company?
Yeah, and it's funny because sometimes you don't think about cultural differences and what might something mean here in the United States and internationally. And I've seen a lot of cases where they've picked up on this. But the in-market representatives, we have them all around the world. Usually it's one market or one person per country. But that's different for the Caribbean. We have one person that covers the entire Caribbean. Essentially, the services they can provide you is you can just have a consultation with them, a virtual consultation, half-hour Zoom call, and you can ask them any questions that you want. It's not really to find buyers, but it's to find more information about the market and might this have a potential in the market, or what are some of the obstacles in the market. And I think one of my favorite programs that they do is called a market scan, which is where they will look at a specific product in a specific country. So for example, they'll look at cookies in Canada. And it will be a very detailed report about first Canada and the market itself and the market size, but also more in depth of they will go around to the different stores in Canada, see the different pricing and the different options available so you can see your competitors within the market. And they'll give you a distribution analysis. So, how is it getting into the market? Is it going through brokers? Is it going straight to retailers? And then they'll give you a list of buyers to contact as well.
Yeah.
And they're also available to do rep finders, which is where companies can set up international meetings with, or sorry, meetings with international buyers in the country of their choosing. So our in-market representative in whatever country that US company picks can set up meetings for you.
Excellent. No, really valuable service. The other question I had is, you've got a lot of eligible expenses here, but what if I'm a company and I've got multiple products and like a couple of them don't meet that 51% US, content requirement? Does that mean I'm not eligible to use the programs, or can I use it for those specific products that do qualify?
Yeah, good question. So you have to at least have some product that is eligible in order to participate in the programs. And it would kind of differ if, depending on how much of your line is eligible. So if, all but one of your products are eligible, that's going to be different from if only one product on your product line of 10 products is eligible. And I would say most companies are able to utilize our programs and services, and it might look a little bit differently. Again, if 90% of your product line is ineligible for the branded program, it might be prorated where it's not 50% eligibility, but maybe it's 25% reimbursement. So it looks a little bit differently depending on the program and services, but I'd say as long as you have eligible product, I'd feel free to reach out and we can talk about how you might be able to work with us.
Perfect. Okay, great. Now we want to move on. We have a real live success story. We've got Virginie Saunier. She's Vice President, Global Dairy Sales for Agrimark. She's joining us today. And Virginie, we just would love to hear your export story. So if you could maybe briefly introduce yourself, your organization, what it does, and what you do there, that would be great. And maybe you can continue that with, talking a little bit about your first export sale and to what country was that to?
Sure. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to talk about Agrimark's product and Agrimark's success story exporting our dairy product globally. I've been back with Agrimark since January of 2019, and I worked for another dairy company prior to that, and I worked for Agrimark already 4 years ago, 12 years ago, where I was in charge of all the export logistics. So Agrimark is a dairy cooperative based in New England and New York State. We are owned by about 600 dairy farmers, and with their milk, we produce a large array of dairy products, starting with the Cabot cheese, the Cabot cheddar, as well as a line of dairy products that are marketed in the Northeast under the Cabot Creamery brand. We also produce cheddar and Gouda cheese under the Macadam brand, which is our plant in upstate New York. And I am part of the, I would say, the Agrimark Whey and Dairy Protein division, where I market all the ingredients, or more specifically the byproducts from our cheese production, which is the whey powders. We produce about 50 million pounds of whey powders every year, and these are the products that Agrimark has been exporting all over the world for the last 20 years. So Agrimark has been working for the food export Northeast program, I would say for at least 15 years, helping us export, enter new markets. So we have used their services to help us finance exhibiting at trade shows, specifically trade shows like the Food Ingredient in Europe, Food Ingredient in Southeast Asia, which are trade shows that are very specific for our line of products. And with our participation, Food Export Northeast has been able to cover 50% of our expense for the booth, for the travel, lodging, as well as the brochure. I typically do a brochure for each trade show in English and in the local currency, and any samples that we send prior to the show. So that has been truly instrumental in helping us finance all our export expansion. We've also been working with the organization to help us cover the cost of our packaging, because we need a different packaging, we need different markings for our product, where depending on where the product exported to a destination. So we have on our bag special labels for Brazil, for example, for Thailand, and all of these expenses are reimbursable by Food Export Northeast, and that's really of tremendous help for us. What else? I've been participating in a few buyers trade mission at some of the major food shows in the US. IFT, for example, which is a big food trade show in Chicago in the summer. And really, again, that gives me the opportunity to meet international buyers during a trade show without having to necessarily travel to all their countries. So this is, again, a great value for us. You had asked me my first export sale. I think that was to China. And because a lot of our whey powders is exported to China, it has been exported there for animal feed application, but more recently for food application. So we have had a lot of interest and a lot of, we've had to put a lot of effort into developing knowledge about how to use our product in that market. And again, thanks to Food Export Northeast, we're able to cover some of these expenses.
Excellent. And as a veteran user of food export, just if you could briefly comment on just the overall kind of application process, the approval process, reimbursement, just from a real live user of it. Can you just comment on that for the audience?
Sure. I find it to be quite easy. You just have to provide a detailed plan of where you want to export and basically budget your travel expenses, your trade show expenses, and you typically submit this, April said, by the end of October. I typically do that, quite frankly, in the last quarter of the year when I do my sales budget for Agrimark. But it's pretty simple. And when you submit your expenses, you will submit for example, if it's a trade show, I always submit a picture of the booth where I was. I submit the expense for the trade shows, the terms of payment, how I paid for that expenses, if it's a wire transfer or a credit card expense. But and overall, we get reimbursed, I would say, within 2 weeks to a month of submitting the expense.
Wow.
I think it's working very well.
Excellent. Well, don't go anywhere. I'm sure we'll have some questions later on from the chat. I want to kind of move now to our next speaker, Alan Dillingham. He's going to present SBA's State Trade Expansion Program, which is also a grant-related program. So as an introduction, Alan is the International Trade Officer and STEP Program Director for New Hampshire's Office of International Commerce. Alan joined the Office of International Commerce in September of 2022. He's got over 30 years of combined experience in international relations and economic affairs in business, government, academia, and nonprofit sectors, including organizing events and education related to international trade opportunities. Alan manages New Hampshire's STEP program, and he's traveled extensively abroad and is a certified pilgrim, having walked most of the Camino de Santiago in northern Spain. It's a pleasure to have you here today, Alan. And happy if you've got the floor to talk to us about STEP and how it can help our small business exporters.
Let me just go to the next. Oh, am I on now?
You are, yeah, you were muted
Okay.
there briefly.
I was muted there. Okay. So what is the STEP program? STEP stands for State Trade Expansion Program, and it is a permanent program of the United States Small Business Administration. The way it works is the SBA makes grants to the individual states or equivalent agencies that work with the states. Most states have a STEP program, but not all of it, but not all of them. What happens is the SBA opens up a competitive process for the states to compete for the funding. The states that win funding then turn around and give reimbursement grants to eligible small business concerns to promote their export related activities. So if you are a small business or you're working with a small business, it's important to know that you apply for STEP grants from the states, not from the SBA. The money comes from there initially, but the states manage their individual programs, and there can be a lot of differences in terms of how you go about making an application, getting reimbursed, that sort of thing. The states differ in the size of their grants and the level of reimbursement. Just to take New Hampshire for an example, we give out grants that range from $1,000 to $6,500 to reimburse up to 80% of small businesses export related projects. Other states have different parameters. I'm not abreast onto what all they are, but for any small businesses interested in this program, they need to contact their state and get the specifics from them. Next slide, please.
And I'll jump in too, Alan. Alan's got the difficult task of just talking about the program in general, because as he mentioned, every state has their own STEP program and they manage it, as they see fit for their particular state. The SBA, which funds the STEP grant program or a portion of it, we've got, certain guidelines that we provide to the states, but the states can kind of take those guidelines and change them a little bit. And so it's not exactly the same. All of the reimbursement amounts are different. Some are higher, some are less. The reimbursement percentages range, I think, from 50 to 80, in some cases 90%. So it's a little bit all over the map, but we're going to give you a place to go where you can find out the STEP program manager in your state, and you can go to that website and learn more. Sorry, Alan.
Right. No problem. Just to pick up on that, assistance in the STEP program is limited to companies that qualify as eligible small business concerns. And what that is will depend on your industry. And there is a link here to the size standards for that. There are size standards and revenue standards as well, but if you go to this link, you will be able to find out if your company qualifies. The small businesses must be export ready and have a product or service that has at least 51% U.S. content. Now, each state STEP program may also have additional eligibility requirements. For example, New Hampshire limits grants to U.S. companies that are registered and in good standing with the New Hampshire Secretary of State. So you have to have a New Hampshire presence legally and be in good standing with the state's revenue department to get that good standing rating from the Secretary of State. Next slide. So what are some of the things that are qualified expenses under STEP? And these are laid out in legislation and by regulation from the SBA. Foreign trade missions are eligible, either actual or virtual. Subscription services provided by the U.S. Department of Commerce, mainly the U.S. Commercial Service, are reimbursable. And there are many valuable services they provide: matchmaking services, Gold Key partnership, agreements. I've given a link to the various services that they provide and that are eligible for reimbursement under the STEP program. Export-related enhancements to websites, apps, or e-commerce platforms, including translation, is qualified as an expense. Export-related training and education. The design of international market materials, including digital materials and ad placements. Trade show exhibits, foreign or domestic, if there is a substantial foreign presence at the domestic trade show. Export training workshops, costs related to foreign product certifications or compliance testing. Next slide, please. And the list goes on. Costs associated with international intellectual property protection, fees for shipping sample products, airfare to foreign trade mission or a foreign trade show, which is subject to Fly America provisions. Hotel, also subject to restrictions by the GSA and State Department in terms of the per diem reimbursements that are eligible. Meals and incidentals are included by SBA as an allowable expense. However, in New Hampshire, we do not treat that as an allowable expense. So you'll see some tweaks from state to state on different items. Premiums on trade insurance, which Joe Raycroft can tell you all about. It's basically the premiums on trade insurance provided by the Export-Import Bank. And also there's sort of a general other category of things that are eligible that are subject to review. So if you have an idea that's not on this list and is not on a prohibited list, it's something that we can discuss with SBA and perhaps find a way to approve. As I mentioned previously, states may have different rules over what they will reimburse. As I mentioned, New Hampshire does not reimburse meals and incidentals for travelers. And we usually limit airfare and hotel reimbursements to one person from each small company.
Yeah, and I would reiterate, I know, here in New England, I think a lot of the STEP programs are the same in that they don't reimburse for meals and incidentals. But again, you check your state. Each state's a little bit different, so just important to know. And I do see. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, and I was going to say, and each state has its own application process.
Correct.
Where this will end, and our application process in New Hampshire is accompanied with a guide to what expenses are qualified, what can be inspected in terms of reimbursement, what things are not allowed.
Yep.
Uh,
And I do see there's a question in the chat. What is the company size limit to qualify for a STEP grant? And I think you did cover this already, Alan, but you want to just reiterate that?
Yeah, that's something that you have to basically look up at on the SBA's website, which the link is a few slides back. It's I believe it's www.sba.gov. And can we go
Yeah.
back?
I'll put it into the chat.
Okay, yeah,
That's probably easiest. And
because there is no one answer. It will depend on what industry you're in.
exactly. And it typically is for companies up to about 500 in 500 employees, but it just really depends on your industry code, your NAICS code.
Yes, that's right.
So, okay.
So we can move to the next slide, which is less fun. These are next slide, please. These are expenses that are not qualified under the STEP program, and that would be activities that occur outside the grant period, which we are now in step 10, which runs from September 30th, 2022 to September 29th, 2024. So if you have an activity that you want to be reimbursed before that period, it would not be eligible. Or if you plan to do one afterwards, that would not be eligible as well. Compensation, wages, or salary of any employee of the grant recipient is not a qualified expense. Expenses related to entertaining clients or government officials as part of your export related activities are not qualified expenses. Phone and internet usage are not covered. Passport or visa fees, immunizations, including COVID vaccinations and tests. These are not covered. Also, new product development or alteration of existing products is not permitted. The idea is that this is to support export for products that are already mature, already on the market, not to develop new products. Printing of international marketing materials is not an allowable expense. So there is you can be reimbursed to design your international marketing materials, but not for actually printing them out. Television and radio production costs are not eligible. Capital goods, product samples, giveaways, and supplies, and also any efforts to create or augment a marketing and advertising campaign to draw international visitors to a state. These are things that are not eligible under the STEP program, and that covers all of the states. That's SBA has set that down as policy, and in New Hampshire we adhere to that. And I think there were a couple of questions that came up. That's basically what I have for the slideshow.
Okay, let's go to the next slide, and we can handle maybe some of the questions toward the end. I want to get to Kevin McCarthy.
Okay.
Again, another real life company that takes advantage of the STEP program in New Hampshire with Alan. Kevin McCarthy is the Global Sales Officer for SleepNet, and again, the 2023 Exporter of the Year. So congratulations on that, Kevin. And please, if you could take a minute to introduce yourself and your company and talk a little bit about what you guys do, what you do there, and a little bit about your exporting experience and experience with the STEP program. We lost you, Kevin. You're on mute. You're back on
Mention.
mute. There you go.
There we go. Okay. Okay. Hopefully it works now.
You're loud and
Loud-
clear, Kevin. Go ahead,
loud
sir.
and clear.
Loud and clear. So thank you, first of all, Joe and Alan, thank you very much, and thank you for that recognition. It was a wonderful event last night. I'll give you a little background on myself, and I know we're running out of time, so I'll go as quickly as possible. I've been working on the international side for multiple companies for the last 30 years in every continent across the globe, whether it's Europe, Latin America, MENA, Asia, Oceania. So I've worked in every area around the globe. I've been blessed in doing that for both large companies and entrepreneurial companies. And so I'm a big supporter, and the company is a big supporter of the STEP program. For SleepNet itself, we manufacture, we're a New Hampshire-based manufacturer. We manufacture the following products. We make non-invasive ventilation products for acute care and hospital care around the globe, as well as pediatric non-invasive ventilation products. We also make CPAP products, as well as N95 safety masks, reusable respirators that are manufactured here. We are a BAA compliant company, so most of our work is done right here in Hampton, New Hampshire. We do source some products that are in Canada or United States and some small amount in Asia. Our experience with STEP, my role as global sales officer, I've been with SleepNet since for almost a little over 6 years, and quickly introduced myself to the STEP program within the first 6 to 8 months in order to basically, to expand our distribution initially into the Middle East and then going into Europe. We have had tremendous success based on our participation in STEP, in which we use STEP not only for just one program, for multiple programs over the course of the year, and as well as the Gold Key partnership programs. So to give you specifics, what I would say is we have used STEP to finance our ability to go into trade shows. So meaning that we go, our first show was Arab Health, and that was in January of 2019. Was our first STEP grant. I'll talk about the ease of use because it is very easy to use. In that period of time, we had some business in the Middle East, mostly in Saudi Arabia, as well as a little in the UAE. Over the course of the first 3 years after our presence, and we've been there every year since, supported by STEP. And some of our expenses in attending that show. In the first 3 years, we saw our business increase over 600-fold, 600% over the course of those first 3 years. It had a tremendous impact in allowing us to present our product to a broader audience, expand our business into territories like Bahrain, Kuwait, even Yemen, Turkey, as well as find additional distributors in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, as well as India and Malaysia. So it's been a great program for us. Additionally, what it allowed us to do is to expand our business into Europe. We participated with STEP in November of 2021 initially with the New England area. Enough so that it was so successful that we decided to go on it on our own with STEP. So meaning that instead of participating just with the having a small presence within the New England booth, we had our own booth at the last show at Medica, which was in November of 2022. And what we've seen is that in a short period of time, the impact on our business in Europe at this point, even as a US-based manufacturer, Europe has become our biggest market, followed by the United States, then the Middle East, and then the rest of the world. So we have been big supporters, and every time I get a chance to talk about the success of STEP, even within our industry, I do so. We've encouraged other companies that are distributors in other areas, such as Illinois. One of our companies that works with us as a distributor in the United States, talked to senior management there about the STEP program, and they got involved in through Illinois, the state of Illinois, and they first went into Europe a year and a half ago, and then started going into the Middle East. So there have been other companies within our industry, within the medical device industry, which is a heavily regulated industry. They're also experiencing success. So cannot say enough about the STEP. Alan and his team are very easy to work with. The process is easy from a standpoint. Each application may take a total of, you do quarterly reports, it may take anywhere from 8 to 12 hours over the course of a year, if that. So it's an easy program to use. What else can I offer on that? I think that's pretty much it for us.
No, that's a great overview. That's perfect, and I want to thank you, Kevin, and also Virginia, just for being ambassadors for these programs, Food Export and STEP. I think it's always important that other companies hear directly from a company that's utilized these programs to understand, how they work and how difficult or easy the application processes are. And it sounds like in both cases, it's pretty straightforward. And as long as you've got a plan and a budget and eligible expenses, it should work for you. So thank you for that. And Brian, I think we do have a few questions in the chat. We have about 5 minutes remaining. Anything we need to answer?
There is one question in regards